Welcome to this episode. I'm really excited to be talking to you in this episode about trusting the process. This episode came from an email I got a few weeks ago. In this email, a lady asked me, Uche, I've heard a lot about you and I would love to work with you on a particular senior executive leadership program. Why this was amazing to me was 10 plus years prior, I had reached out to the same lady and said to her, I want to be an executive coach in your organization. The answer when you remove all the niceties was simply no. You're not good enough. You don't have enough experience. Now, 10 plus years later, she's heard about me from another person and said, this guy is the person you need on this program. And then shortly after I got the email, I was speaking to an MD in a bank. He's a young black guy. And so to be an MD in an investment bank is pretty impressive, right? And I was saying, how did you become an MD so young and you're black, quite frankly? And in his various stories, he made the statement. He said, Uche, ultimately though, you need to trust the process. And that's what got me thinking. And you know, trust is one element of that statement. When you sit on a chair, you trust that the chair is going to carry your weight. That's what trust is. You're settled on the chair because you know it's going to carry your weight. Or let's say you're flying from London to Houston in America. You trust that this metal thing called a plane, suspended 33,000 feet in the air and more, is going to get you from London to Houston. That is trusting the process, literally with your life. And so let's use that plane as the process that is getting you from London to Houston. And process, the other part of the statement, is, and I'm putting it as an acronym. P is preparation, R is relationships, O, optimism, C, courage, E, endurance, S is seasons, and the final S is spiritual practices. And I'm going to just take each one and share some stories about how you need to trust the process. Let us start with preparation. Preparation, there's a quote I love. It's old, but it's timeless. And it says, success happens when preparation meets opportunity. You need to prepare. A key aspect of preparation, and what I'm focusing on today though, is practice. And you know that saying, practice makes perfect? I think that is absolute nonsense, right? Practice makes permanent. So if you practice averagely, you will be permanently average. Now, then how do you practice effectively? There's a great book by Carl Davenport. It's called So Good They Cannot Ignore You. Can you describe yourself like that? In that book, he coins a phrase, deliberate practice. Let's use Michael Jordan as an example. Would you believe Michael Jordan, who is arguably the greatest basketball player of all times, he was rejected to get into his basketball when he was trying to get into his high school basketball team. Michael Jordan did not go away and say, basketball is not for me. He engaged in deliberate practice. What is that? That is mastering the fundamentals of your craft, the area that you want to dominate, the area that you want to be great in. In his case, taking each aspect of the basketball game from defense to three-point throws to rebounds. He mastered each one. If you read his story in a good book is Carol Dweck's Mindset, shares Michael Jordan's journey and story. And if you read that story, you see how much practice he put into each aspect of the game. A good example of deliberate practice is also myself. In the story I gave you, what led to the 180? Rather than go away feeling rejected, I literally went to the woman who had said no and said, help me. What can I do? Because I definitely feel I can be a great executive coach in this organization and help you deliver awesome executive programs. So she said, look, there's one part of this organization that deals with more junior populations. Perhaps you can start there. I think they're looking for people and I'll be happy to introduce you to them. I said, well, a foot in the door is better than nothing. So I started working with this junior population, and I was ranked number one coach in that space. Over the next 3 to 4 years, I was deliberately practicing every aspect of being a fantastic executive coach. And eventually, I got into the executive education side of the business. That's what I mean by preparation. I often like to say that the greatest proof of your faith is evidenced by your pursuit and how much preparation you're willing to put in, irrespective of the rejections and the circumstances that you find yourself in. So let's now go to our relationships. I genuinely know that I am where I am, and every successful person I've had the opportunity to meet, interview, coach, relationships always play a fundamental role in helping you moving forward. So in trusting the process, you need to trust that the relationships that you are building and you are investing in will be critical and will be useful in helping you get to where you need to get to. Now, there's a great book by Adam Grant, Give and Take, and he's looking at people who are successful and getting to the top of organizations. And in that book, he finds two amazing things. Firstly, at the bottom of the pyramid are givers, and at the top of the pyramid are also givers. The only difference between those two groups are givers at the top know how to give, but they also know when to take. So in trusting the process, be strategic, be genuine, be authentic, but be a giver in relationships and take when you need to take. Let's break down relationships a little bit more. In different buckets, you have supporters. A great way to think about it is, are you in your tribe? Think about Silicon Valley, right? In Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell really talks about this, where there's a reason great tech companies come out of Silicon Valley, right? Together, you have the Apples of the world, you have the Microsofts of the world, you have the IBMs of the world. All these organizations came out of Silicon Valley, and whilst they are working in their organizations, he gives a great story about a bar that they all at the end of the day get to. And so success is breeding success, right? People are sharing the problems that they are having, and they are sharing how they are breaking through their problems. They are fired up because iron sharpens iron. Are you amongst your tribe where iron is sharpening iron? You need supporters if you're going to go through the process. And then you get to mentors. I love Sir Isaac Newton's quote. He said that if I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants, right? And so, which giant shoulders are you standing on? Which mentors are you building relationships with? And in a mentor relationship, I actually believe that the mentee, your focus needs to be not only what you can get from it, but what you can get, what value you can add to your mentor. That's where the relationship becomes really fruitful for you as a mentee. And then you have sponsors. Sponsors are people who literally pull you up. They give you opportunities. If you're in corporate organizations, sponsors are people who spend their political and relationship capital to help you move forward. And so the point here is this: without relationships, you're not going to be able to get past the process. You're not going to be patient enough or have the support you need to get to the end. And so sit down, review the relationships that you have, and ask yourself, which ones do I need to invest more in and continue to grow? Which relationships are missing that I need to start and build? Which relationships are there, but quite frankly, the season for that relationship has passed. Because when you think of relationships, you have relationships for a lifetime. They're going to be with you for the whole of your life. And then you have relationships for a season. And you don't want to force it when seasonal relationships, that season has ended. So with those relationships, you're going to disassociate. Never slam the door in any relationship, but you just know that you have a limited amount of time to build relationships, and this is one whose season has ended. And then you will have some relationships that are going to be in your life, but quite frankly, you don't need to build as much anymore. You can limit associations in those relationships. So that's the relationship point when it comes to trusting the process. And then without optimism, O is optimism. Without optimism, a positive outlook that things are going to get better, at some point you are going to fall off the process, because optimism is key. The part about optimism that I want to zone in on in this episode is, are you enjoying what you are doing? Let me tell you, and take it from me. If you are trying to achieve anything great in your life, in your career, if you're not enjoying what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, at some point, you're going to follow the process. Achieving greatness is challenging. And so part of staying in the process, trusting the process, is being fired up every day by what you are doing. Will you have some down days? Absolutely. But if 80% of a day you would rather not be doing what you're doing, a piece of advice: sit down and find what it is you truly want to do, the difference you want to make, and go and do that. I'm not saying quit your job, absolutely not. You need to do things with wisdom. But without being fired up with what you're doing, you're going to fall off the process. You can't be optimistic doing what you hate or doing what you don't particularly like or what you're not passionate about. So when it comes to optimism, I say that without believing that it's going to get better and better and better and better, it becomes difficult. As a Christian, there's a particular scripture that helps me and really fires up my optimism. And that scripture is, all things work together for those that love God and are called according to his purpose. Right? So I'm a person of faith, and for me, God plays a big role in believing that all things are going to eventually be good, even if the current situation does not make sense. I encourage you to consider that when you think about your life and optimism. And then we have C, and C is courage. The aspect of courage that I want to zone in on in this episode is being willing to take risks. The simple fact is, no risk, no reward. You know, the truth of the matter is, people who trust the process and who get to the end of it, those people believe that you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like, a good portion of the time, you're going to be stepping out of your comfort zone and pushing those barriers more and more and more. And when it comes to risks, I think a good way to think about it is the latent risk. These are risks that apply to all of us. All of us, you know, if there was a global pandemic like COVID, that affects everybody. There's nothing you did. We just have to deal with it. Those risks, though, if dealt with properly, can bring about some amazing opportunities for you. The one I want to focus on is forward risks. These are risks that you take intentionally to move yourself forward in life, in your career, in your personal life as well. No risk, no reward. I'll say it again. No risk, no reward. And when it comes to forward risks, there are about three that I want to highlight. The first one is calculated risks. This is where you take a risk and you know, if it goes well, this is what is going to happen. If it doesn't go well, this is what is going to happen. Those types of risks, we should take regularly. A good example is a lady who was offered a role. She used to work in an investment bank, and she was offered a role in a different side of the bank to be an operations manager for a division. And she thought to herself, oh my days, if I leave the M&A division where I'm making money and you're on the revenue side of the bank, and I take this role, it's an internal role, I'm going to get off the line, so not in a revenue making role. I'm not sure I want to do this. Being on the revenue side is really how, as an investment banker, you continue to rise. And she was now going to go from M&A to be an operations manager, a COO, if you will, for a different side, the equity side of the bank, where you're raising money, but it was going to be internal. She said, well, look, if this goes well, I will build relationships with really senior people in the bank. If it doesn't go well, those people won't think highly of me, and I may not be able to go back into a line position. And it was a risk she was willing to take. She took the risk, began to build relationships with really senior people in the bank. She was in meetings with, the heads of M&A that she would not have been in because of her level at the time. Now she was in those meetings learning how they build strategy, created a vision for the bank, galvanized the investment bank to move forward. After doing this for a couple of years, guess what? She was able to go back to the revenue side, but now she was on the equity capital markets desk. She became an MD in good time, and guess what? The person that she was COO for, that person eventually became the CEO of the entire bank. That's what you mean by a calculated risk. It pays off in the end. Then you have what we call a studied risk. Studied risks, these are risks that if it goes well, you know what the outcome is going to be. But if it doesn't go well, you are not sure what the outcome is going to be. There are going to be different options, and you can only take the risk and see what happens. Now, I'll give you an example of this. There was a guy, my initial background before I became a management consultant and executive coach was in investment banking. So I have a lot of stories from investment banking. So this is another banking story. And he decided that if he was going to ever get a chance of being an MD in that particular bank, he's going to have to step out of the shadow of the MD that he currently did a lot of work with. The situation was, he was part of the success equation for that particular MD. And so the MD didn't have a vested interest in him moving forward, right? Although he said all the right things. And so one day, studied risk, this man said, look, I'm going to put together a business plan, and I'm going to go and speak to my boss's boss. I'm going to let him see why I think this new business area is going to be really good. And he didn't feel that his current MD was really pushing his career case forward and this business case. He had the conversation with the boss's boss, and then a couple of weeks later, he's invited into a meeting with his boss. And guess what? He sees his MD in the room and he's thinking, okay, what is going on? Am I going to get fired? And his boss's boss says something simple. He said, look, you have two options. You can stay as things are, or I will give you the opportunity to go and grow this business to a beautiful height. But if it doesn't work out, and I'm only going to give you a year to show that this can work, if it doesn't work out, you will no longer have the protection of your current MD. And he said, you know what? I take the risk, I take the challenge, let's see how it goes. Complete studied risk. I'm showing it because it worked out, and he became an MD a couple of years later. But the fact is, without taking that risk, he would never have become the MD by that time, and he may actually have left the bank eventually. So when it comes to trusting the process, you're only going to move forward if you take forward risks. And the final one is step out on faith risks. Now, these are risks that if it goes well, the upside is amazing and all is going to be good. If it doesn't go well, you're going to fall, and you're going to fall hard. It's kind of like when I left investment banking to pursue my dream, and the first time I tried my hand out in business, I failed completely. I lost everything. I became broke, and I had to get a job eventually after almost a year of suffering, and it was more than a 60% pay cut. that's an example of a step out on faith risk and you fall flat on your face. It didn't work out. Eventually, I was able to navigate my way back to where I am now and became quite successful in the business. So, trust the process. P for now is preparation. R, relationships. O, optimism. And C, courage. You need to take those risks. So, in this episode, I've spoken on the first part of the process. And what I'm going to do is pause, and in the next episode, I will speak about the remaining parts of process. Now, let's do a recap on what we've discussed. You need to trust the process, like a plane taking you from London all the way to Houston or wherever it is you're trying to get to, from mediocre, let's say, to greatness. And the first part is P, preparation. The proof of your faith that it is going to happen and that you trust the process is that you continue to prepare deliberately on the fundamentals that will take you from average to good to great. Because practice doesn't make perfect, practice makes permanent, and only deliberate practice gets you to where you need to be. Success really truly only happens when preparation meets opportunity. And then you have relationships. You need to review your relationships. You only have a limited amount of time to invest in relationships. And so, if you need to do it again, the stakeholders, which relationships do you need to really invest in and grow? Which ones do you need to actually start? Which ones do you need to begin to limit association? And which ones do you need to disassociate from? Because relationships are for a lifetime or they are seasonal. And then you have optimism. Are you enjoying what you are doing? Is it firing you up? Does it give you life? If it doesn't, you need to reevaluate, because there's no way you can trust the process and remain in the game doing something that you don't love or doesn't give you meaning and fulfillment. And finally, C is courage. You need to have the courage to take risks. So, if this has been helpful, share it, like it, make a comment, or ask a question. Until next time, stay blessed.